For this video, I'm going to be going over an update for my shrimp jar that's just under 5 months old, and the shrimp in here have been breeding like crazy. This is meant to be more of a practical Walstad method shrimp jar rather than an aquascaped setup, but so far I'm very happy with its progress. I record these videos with my smartphone, so the image quality isn't the best, but all of these tiny yellow dots on the lava rock are baby shrimp bred in here over the last couple of months, and there's plenty more babies around the rest of the jar. So starting with the jar setup, and I have a dedicated video going over exactly how I built it that I link in the card and description. Here's a quick overview for anyone who missed it, and this is a 1.7 US gallon jar which is around 6.5 litres that uses the Walstad method. It has a layer of cheap soil that's capped with sand, or in this case gravel, to lock down the mud. In my opinion, this method is perfect for shrimp jars as the method uses live plants as a natural filter, helping to save space in the jar. I'm using Rotala Rotundifolia as my natural filter plant, but most fast grown stem plants will work. I keep the jar at room temperature, and I do think that the warmer summer months have helped with the breeding yields in this setup, but during the colder months you can just add a heater if needed. I run the tank on a cheap Haiger USB light, but I have seen people run similar setups on regular desk lamps and still get great results. So moving on to breeding the shrimp, and as you can see there's an absolute ton of babies in here now. There's at least 4 generations of babies in here, and I'd guess that there could be as many as 5, but they move around so quickly that it's difficult to count. The baby shrimp are too small to show up on my camera phone, so taking a photograph and counting them that way is just out of the question. One of the main things that I want to stress is that I haven't done anything to this jar to encourage breeding or try and maximise breeding yields. I just set the jar up, let it cycle, added the shrimp, and then let nature take its course. Thankfully, I did manage to add a mix of male and female shrimp to the jar, with this being more challenging than a lot of beginners initially realise. Female Neocaridina shrimp often hold the most colour, making them a more popular option in the shrimp keeping hobby, and a lot of people accidentally end up with a bunch of female shrimp without any males. Unfortunately, 2 of the original shrimp in here have passed away, but I honestly think that this is just due to natural causes rather than any specific problems with this setup. The original shrimp I moved over to this tank were bred in my 12-gallon yellow Neocaridina colony, and I've had those for just over a year now, and Neocaridina shrimp don't live very long, so they might have passed on due to natural causes. Another thing that does back this theory up is that I haven't seen a single dead baby shrimp in here, but on the flip side of that, their smaller size would let the rest of the colony eat them a lot quicker than an adult. Now I'm pretty sure the first generation of baby shrimp in here will be getting close to breeding age now, so this could in theory just continue and continue and continue. Moving on to feeding, and I do think that this is one area where people make mistakes when intentionally trying to breed Neocaridina shrimp. Now these shrimp will happily eat the algae and biofilm that grows in their tank, and they will breed on that diet, but in my experience I've always had higher breeding yields when I offer them high protein foods. Until recently I was feeding this jar high protein foods 3 times per week, mainly just to mix their diet up and give them a little treat, but usually this was on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday. The 2 staple foods that I consistently use are Fluval Bug Bites bottom feeder formula and Hikari mini algae wafers. Fluval Bug Bites' main ingredient is black soldier fly larvae, offering plenty of vitamins, minerals and protein for the shrimp, and the main ingredient in Hikari mini algae wafers is actually fish meal, not algae, offering plenty of protein. Now I literally plucked these numbers out of thin air, but so far it's working very well, so I try to add 1 Fluval Bug Bite bottom feeder granule or 1/4 of a mini algae wafer per 10 shrimp in the tank, and that's adult shrimp, not babies. From time to time I do add treat foods to the jar, but this is mainly bloodworm, but I have tried some low protein treats too, such as shrimp snowflake food and leaves. The leaves are directly from my drown jar that I use to let the leaves pre-sink and start to decompose and collect algae and biofilm prior to feeding them to my Neocaridina, and it makes things so much easier. Due to the population in this jar increasing, I have started to feed the shrimp more frequently, and right now I am feeding every single day and I haven't noticed any problems with the water parameters so far. And that brings me on to the water parameters, as healthy baby shrimp need suitable water parameters right from the start of their life to help them safely molt and grow, because baby shrimp will molt a lot more frequently than adults as they're grown in size at a rapid pace. I live in an area with soft tap water, so I do like to add some shrimp salt to my water before I add it to my shrimp jars and shrimp tanks to add some calcium and magnesium to help the shrimp molt safely. If you live in an area with hard water, then this probably won't be needed, so you can overlook this. GH measures the general hardness of the water in the jar, with calcium and magnesium being the most important elements, but a generic GH test kit like mine will include other things in its reading, so it can be a little misleading. In some cases this may result in you having the correct pH and GH in your jar, but your shrimp will still fail their molts and start dying, and it's usually because there's not enough calcium and magnesium in your water, so keep this in mind. Because of this, I do know some people who don't even check their GH anymore, and personally I don't even check my TDS anymore, because in my opinion it's an even more inaccurate number to go by. If you do plan to track your GH, and personally I aim for a GH of between 6 and 10 for my Neocaridina, and it is easy to achieve this with shrimp salt. I really haven't been paying attention to the KH or pH of this jar recently, as the shrimp salt tends to just manage those parameters for me, and as you can see the shrimp are just breeding like crazy, so there doesn't seem to be any real problems. Since cycling the jar back when I first set it up, the ammonia and nitrite tests have always came back at 0 ppm, but I have been paying more attention to these tests recently because I've increased the amount of food I'm adding to support the larger population. Thankfully, Neocaridina shrimp have a very low bioload, so even with the recent increase in feeding, there hasn't really been any large spikes or anything like that in the amount of nitrogen compounds in the water. This is one of the main reasons I love Rotala Rotundifolia for this type of jar, because it does well in soft water, hard water, heated and unheated setups, and it just uses up the nitrogen compounds in the water column to keep your shrimp safe. Now we are coming out of the British summertime here, so my water temperature will slowly start declining over the coming months, but I would guess that it peaked at around 77 degrees Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius, and it's been as low as around 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius over the last few months. I honestly do think that these warmer water temperatures will help with breeding, but for general survival I really don't worry about the water temperature of these jars, as my shrimp in my first jar that I made last year made it through the British winter without issue, but the shrimp weren't breeding during the colder months. As I mentioned earlier though, if you do want your shrimp to keep breeding during the colder months, you can get a little Hygge nano heater like this one and just add it to the jar to maintain a warmer temperature. Moving on to suitable shrimp species for this type of jar, and personally I'd go with Neocaridina shrimp every single time, especially when you're trying to breed the shrimp in the jar. Now I have absolutely no experience with Taiwan B Caridina shrimp at all, but I do know they are increasing in popularity in the hobby right now, but personally I wouldn't recommend anything like that for this type of jar setup. To my understanding, they're a lot more delicate than Neocaridina shrimp, and depending on your tap water, you might need to use reverse osmotic deionized water for your shrimp to survive if you're going with some type of Caridina shrimp. That's why I've just stuck to Neocaridina shrimp for this type of jar, because they are a lot more hardy than some of the fancy shrimp types out there, and they will happily breed prolifically provided they have the right diet and are kept at a suitable temperature. There's also plenty of different colours of Neocaridina shrimp in the hobby to choose from too, so I'm confident that you'll be able to find something that meets your taste that you can keep in your jar. I did keep an Armano shrimp in my old shrimp jar last year and it made it through the winter without issue, and I still have him in one of my better fish tanks now, but Armano shrimp require brackish water for their young to survive, so that rules out breeding them in this type of jar. I have seen posts online from other people saying they have kept ghost shrimp, babalti shrimp and tangerine tiger shrimp in jars with minimal issues because they are relatively hardy shrimp, but I have no experience with these, so if you do like the look of those shrimp, you'll have to go off and do your own research. In my honest opinion though, if you are new to the shrimp keeping hobby and you want your shrimp to breed in your jar, then I'd highly recommend you start with some regular red cherry shrimp because they're easy to find, they're cheap and they're very easy to care for. So I want to quickly touch on overpopulation, as I am starting to get to the stage where this may become an issue in this jar. There are two different paths that I could take with this one, as I do have a dedicated yellow Neocaridina breeding tank, so I could move some of the shrimp over from the jar to that tank if needed. The other path that I could choose is to leave the jar as it is and switch over to the survival of the fittest method, where food limitations and natural selection are left to take their course. Now I know that this may sound cruel if you are new to the shrimp keeping hobby, but I am actually leaning more towards that type of setup for this jar. My yellow Neocaridina breeding tank is just shy of 7 US gallons or 25 litres, so there's still an upper population limit that I can keep in that tank anyway, so eventually I'll run into the same problem there. I just think it would be interesting to see how this population evolves over the next 6 months or so if I do leave it as it is, to see what happens with the young and if the population keeps increasing or if it does balance out at some stage. I do want to quickly touch on maintenance, as I have made a couple of changes to this setup since my last update. When I initially set this jar up, I did add a bunch of Salvinia floating plants to the surface of the tank, but they seem to be causing issues with light penetration and my Rotala Rotundifolia did start to yellow. Since then I have removed all of the Salvinia from the jar so the light can get directly to the Rotala and it's coloured back up pretty quickly, and more importantly I still haven't noticed any changes in water parameters without the Salvinia being in here. I used to have to remove a fistful of Salvinia every week from this small jar because the plant grows so quickly, so just removing all of it has removed that maintenance task, which pretty much was the main task I had. There's only 3 real tasks that I have for this jar now, and that is feeding them daily, and then once every 2 weeks I trim the Rotala Rotundifolia back and I'll do a water top up, but other than that this is a very hands off jar because this light is automated, I don't have to turn it on or off or anything like that. So that brings the video to an end guys. I am very impressed with how many baby shrimp this small jar's been able to produce in such a small period of time, but like I said, we are moving into the autumn now, so I am curious what's going to happen as the colder temperatures set in. Thanks for watching guys, hopefully you found the video helpful and have a good day.